So the TA had them graded. The answer keys was distributed on Monday. So if you have any questions about the grades, talk to me. The average and the median was 52. So I forget what the minimum was. And I think most of you got the answers. You know, it's a mixed bag. I don't think there was any one question that everybody did bad. But if you have any questions and concerns, talk to me. Right? And we'll have the final exam the model exam on Friday. It's a half-an-hour exam. It's in class, open book, open notes, or
Is it multiple choice or same as the other kind of homework question?
it's going to be a mixture of both. I haven't set the questions yet, so it's not all going to be multiple choice. But even if it's multiple choice, I ask you to give me a brief sentence on why you think the answer is what it is. So you should have enough time to finish it in half an hour. So it's not going to require you to write lots of essays and stuff. So it's open book, open notes. You're free to bring your laptop to look at the class notes or whatever. You're not free to do Google and search for the answer. Not that you should have time to do that, but within reasonable bounds, you're free to look at other stuff. And then after the exam, we'll discuss the solutions. Right? So does everyone have the homework assignments over here? Okay. So today I'd like to wrap up the notion of scheduling that we were looking at before. So in the last lecture, we were looking at a number of different algorithms, starting from first come, first serve, shortest job first, and basically going over to priority scheduling and round robin. Right? All of them were trying to figure out how best to use the CPU for the different parameters we looked at, throughput and waiting times and so on. They're trying to manage this without knowing the exact precise mixture of what the requests would be in the future. So they're trying to do a best job of what they think the users are working on, right? And so we'll continue on with that a little bit to see how a real operating system may build its scheduling algorithms based on these, right? So it's real operating system is trying to manage a whole bunch of different processes, and so we'll look at different multi-levels and stuff, and then we'll wrap up with multi-processor scheduling, touch on that a little bit, right? So is the stuff we covered in the previous lecture clear so far? So one of the other parameters with the preemptive scheduling is, with the preemptive scheduling, you decide to yank a process which is running on the CPU and schedule a new process, right? And then I was talking about how big the time quanta should be, and the time quanta should be small enough so you get the appearance of multiple processors running, and it should be large enough so you don't have to pay the penalty, because every time you do a context switch, you pay a penalty. So if you think of the time quanta, depending on what you're choosing, you have different levels of context switch. So if you have a process which requires 10 time units, and the quanta happens to be 12, then there's no context switch. It finishes to completion. If the quanta was 6, then you have one context switch. If the quanta was 1, then you get 9 context switches. And that's part of what you're trying to do for your homework project, trying to just play with this number a little bit. And so that number of how big the quanta should be is something that you try to tune, so that, as a rule of thumb, your book suggests that 80% of the CPU bus should be finishing within one quanta, right? So there's no exact precise reason why you should choose 100 hertz or 1000 hertz, but you're trying to optimize it for the kind of stuff that you're trying to do, right? So how is your project coming along? So are more people able to make progress? Did anyone notice a difference other than the test program in terms of if you compare it with a shorter interval or a longer interval? Did you notice any difference at all? It's kind of hard to tell because it's still fast enough for most normal stuff. Your interactive things will still be fast enough. because I think it's like a 2.6 or 2.8 gigahertz machine. But if you try hard enough, you'll notice one or the other will make a difference, right? So the problem with the vanilla approaches that we talked about is one size does not fit all, right? The OS is trying to figure out what it should do for what the process will do for the next immediate future, but there are different classes of applications in a given system. One of the things that we talked about was this is background processors. Some of them are trying to do a backup or what have you. There are interactive jobs which are taking a user input. So for example, right now, PowerPoint is doing something. There are things in the background. So you may want to treat them different. You may want to treat them in multiple levels, and most operating systems try to do that. They try to treat different processors as interactive or background or what have you, and try to schedule them differently. So you may want to have round robin for foreground and first come first serve for background processors. Right? So first you have to decide how much you want to give to these different mixtures, how much you want to give to foreground, how much you want to give to background. And then within each class, you may decide to do different algorithms. You may decide to do round robin for foreground, and background is in first come first serve, or a larger quanta, right? You can change that so that the foreground processors look like they're going faster, or the machine is responsive. The background processors still get to run and get their stuff. So so you have to decide how much you want to give to each of these classes, and how many classes you want to give, and how do you want to do this switching, right? So if you look at it in a graphical fashion, you have multiple classes of applications, right? Somehow magically the system knows which class you belong to, right? It may either infer that based on something about the system, or it may be that there may be some process which assigns different priorities or different classes to applications, right? Different operating systems implement that differently, but somehow you get assigned to the right set of classes, and then the OS can schedule each one's differently. It figures out how much it should give to each class, and then it should figure out how it wants to do for each one. So it can optimize for multiple goals at the same time. It can make the interactive task have responsive, and it can increase the efficiency for background tasks, right? So that's typically what the real operating systems do. They tend to have many classes, right? A little variation of the multiple class notion is the level of multiple class with feedback, right? So I said magically the OS can know you belong to the interactive class or batch processing class, or more realistically, the OS can watch over the processors and see what they're doing, and based on what they're doing, assign you to different stuff. So for example, when you come in, you could be in a default class and given a certain amount of CPU. And based on how you use that, so if you're doing too much context switching, then you can move it to a different process. If you're using too much CPU, you can move it to a different class. And then if you don't use too much CPU anymore, it can move you back, right? And most operating systems would try to do some of this stuff, right? The first one we talked about, multi-level queue, it's good as long as you know how to get there. The way you know how to get there is to have feedback. So you kind of keep monitoring the process, and as it changes, it moves from across the different classes. So, for example, when a process comes in, it may be scheduled on a round robin at 8 milliseconds. So it doesn't matter what kind of application you are, but you get assigned to 8 milliseconds. And if you don't get your job done, if you don't get your, if you keep using the CPU for a while, you get pushed to the next level, which gives you round robin on a 16 millisecond interval, and then it gets moved to first come first serve or what have you, right? So you have complex policies which are trying to do this stuff. So that's where you spend most of the OS complexity in terms of building a scheduling algorithm, right? So essentially, for any individual process, you're trying to figure out what its future use of the CPU would be to choose, whether it should be good for round robin or what have you for that application. And then you're trying to do a scheduling for the whole system by having a mix. So you have different processes. So you try to do the best for each process, So the ultimate goal is to try to optimize each class of applications for what it's trying to do, right? So does that make sense? So figuratively, this is how you have it. You do this because this is very important metric, right? Most of what you notice when you go into a system is how responsive things are and how efficiently you're using the CPU, because that tends to be the one resource that most applications tend to notice. So you want to try to give as much flexibility in managing these things as possible, right? So as a developer, you want to make sure that your OS can be as general purpose as possible. So your web servers may naturally migrate to the best level where they get optimized for whatever they're trying to do, right? So that's how OSs would manage with the different ways to schedule the CPU to different processes and trying to do a global optimization of the entire system, right? And on Monday, we'll see how Linux uses the schedulers specifically. But for now, this is how the general systems do. Right. Is that good? So now that we've finished working, now that we looked at how scheduling would happen for one CPU, the next variation is how you would do that for multiple processors. So one of the things we mentioned before was the future is going more and more towards multiple processors or dual cores and stuff. So virtually in any one machine, you have two CPUs, right? So when you have many processors, you have to figure out how to assign these tasks. And multiple processors give you more opportunity to do load balancing. Now you get to decide which processor to assign. So you can actually improve the system throughput. You can actually use these things better. And we are really focusing on homogeneous multiprocessors. So if you have two processors, they're both the same. So the OS can decide the process to be scheduled on either one of them, right? It's more complicated if you assume that the processors are different. If you assume that one has a graphical engine, one doesn't, then you have to have some notion of which should go where, right? And that notion comes in with what we call affinity, which we'll see in a few slides. So within the model of having multiple CPUs being available to the applications, right? You can think of asymmetric multiprocessing or symmetric multiprocessing. In asymmetric multiprocessing, even though all the processors are the same, from the OS perspective, right, it looks at them slightly differently, just for its own ease of use, right? So OS itself is sort of like a process running on the system. So if you have multiple processors, right, doing this stuff and they're making independent decisions, right, then you have to modify the structures. You have to modify the ready queue and stuff inside the kernel. So for example, if a process was assigned to a CPU, you have to mention somewhere that it's no longer in the ready queue and it's running, right? So if that data structure is being shared by the multiple processors, then the OS kernel itself should be protected. It should be aware of the sharing and protect itself from multiple threads, multiple processors modifying itself, right? In the next module, we'll look at the synchronization problems involved with this stuff. So basically, you want to make sure that only one of them is updating any one data structure, right? And you use locks and stuff. You will use locks and stuff to solve that problem. But the problem, if you're doing it inside the kernel, is if there are two CPUs trying to modify a kernel data structure, right? If you make one of them wait, you have to make the OS itself sort of wait. So it makes writing the OS kernel harder, right? Because one of your goals is you want your OS to run on single processor and multiprocessor at the same time. So you want to optimize for one. So you don't want to do the locking for the single processor case, but if you use that same kernel on a multiprocessor, you have to make sure that you lock everything. Because if you don't, either you have inconsistent states where the kernel thinks that the process is running when it's not, what have you, and then you get a crash, or you have the kernel stopping because it has to lock and do complicated stuff. So the simpler way to solve that is to say asymmetric multiprocessing, where you say all scheduling or the kernel only runs on a processor, right? It usually is a processor 0. So you say all kernel options are run from processor 0, and applications can run on any other process, right? That's easy from a developer perspective, but it's not good load balancing. The kernel has to do something, and there are other processes which are free, it doesn't get to run. Whereas if you go with the true symmetric multiprocessing, then anything can run anywhere, including the OS kernel, right? So as OSs evolve, they typically tend to go from uniprocessor to asymmetric multiprocessing, and then at some point they evolve to symmetric. Right? So some of the additional stuff, so the vanilla load balancing states that now I have two or more processors. So if a process is ready to run, I can assign to one of those, right? So there are other opportunities or problems which happen when you try to do multiple processors. One is the notion of affinity, right? We haven't seen caching yet. So the idea is, if a process is running on a particular processor, it has some state lying around it. It has a notion of caches. It's doing some things. It's happily situated up there, right? So if there are two processors, if you keep switching them back and forth, right, without thinking about this affinity, right, then you tend to do more work, or you don't use as much opportunity that you possibly could. So the notion of processor affinity is the OS tries to say, if a process or thread was running on a single processor, right, it tries to schedule you back on the same processor if it could, right? Even if it won't otherwise. So there are two processors which are waiting on the queue, and I have to decide which ones to assign, right? There is one processor which is free, but that has affinity to the one which is behind what I'm trying to assign right now, right? So fairly, I should assign the one I'm trying to assign on this processor. But if I wait a tad bit, right, and I assign this to somewhere else, I could keep my affinity, right? Which is similar to one of the notion that you mentioned in a previous lecture on, if I know something about the future a little bit, then I could use it. If I only need one extra cycle, it may just be okay to kind of nudge it out, kind of stuff, right? So if I know that there was affinity, if I know that it was running in a particular machine, so I could try to do this affinity business, right? But the challenge here is, if you don't do it right, then you'll have these CPUs idling, right? So you have to manage these things. So you can either do it where the OS itself tries to do it by itself, or more likely you'll have stuff from the programming language. So if you're running a thread, there are primitives where you can say, I have affinity to a process. I'm doing something which would be helped by you leaving me in the same processor. So more complex systems would try to use that. They try to write code which says, I know what I'm doing, and I think if you leave me on the same processor, I can do a better job. So it can tell the OS, I have affinity, try to schedule me the same processor, right? Which means that when you do a context switch, the OS has to remember which processor you are running and try to see if it can give it to you, right? Even though it may involve some cost, it'll try to assign it to you. But at some point, it has to decide that overall, for the system's goal, it has to not listen to you, kind of stuff, right? So it balances its need to load share and use the processors fully, and trying to do the best for a particular process, right? So the next one, which is not exactly in your textbook, right, is the notion of gang scheduling, right? Gang scheduling basically says that if you have a number of processors or threads or something which are cooperating, which are working on the same problem together, right? They know that they are doing the same thing. So it could be a producer-consumer where they are working together, right? Both of them are sharing something. Both of them are passing some data structures and stuff. If you let them be scheduled normally, right? You'll have one process schedule. It'll send a little bit of data to the next one. Then it'll get rescheduled. It'll go to sleep. So the other one will eventually get woken up, right? And it'll use whatever was sent, use it a little bit, and let's say it's sending something back, right? Then it'll go to sleep. So you go through the sequential stuff. I first run for a little bit, I send something to the next process, and then independently that will come on and use this stuff. So overall system could tend to be very slow. Is that clear? What would happen, right? So if you have two of them very closely working together, right? So if you let them run normally, basically after I send something to the other process, I would go to sleep, right? And then eventually the other one will get woken up. He'll do something, and then he'll send me something back. Then he'll go to sleep, and then I will wake up and do the stuff, which may be the right thing to do from a perspective of keeping the system busy all the time, right? But if I know that we are doing this, right, the system can be a little bit inefficient by saying, I will schedule both of you to run at the same time. So when you send something, right, I don't take the CPU away from you, even though I know that you're waiting for I/O, right? Because I know that you send something really small. So in a little bit, you're gonna get your next job to go. So if I schedule you both, overall these processes may turn out to be running better, even though while they're doing this I/O, the CPU is going to be idle. Does that make sense? So basically you are trying to have something like this is process FP1, 2, right? So the thread comes up here, it sends something over here, right? So it did some CPU stuff, and then it sends some data over here, which makes this process make progress, and then it sends something back, and you make progress, and so on, right? So it's sort of like a coroutine kind of stuff. If they're doing something like this, if you schedule them both together and don't take the CPU away during this interval, right? Even though they're idle, you will overall make the time this time. You'll optimize for this time, right? The algorithms we talked about before would say, at this point, I take the CPU away from this process, give it to somebody else, and so that somebody would happen in the next, eventually this will get a chance to run, eventually this will get a chance to run, and so on. So the overall time would be higher, right? So the notion of gang scheduling here is to say, I have 4 processes which are collaborating together, so if you're going to schedule them, schedule all as a gang, right? So in this case, schedule 2 processes together or none at all, right? You won't schedule one process over the other. Both of them get scheduled, or both of them don't get scheduled. Now, of course, you have to worry about the balancing effect and stuff. So if one gang says, I want half the CPUs, and you give it to them, then the rest of the world suffers. So typically what you try to do is you have multi-level kind of scheduling where you say, I won't let you run at all, but when I let you run, I'll give you like a while. So I'll give you like half an hour while you can do this gang scheduling, and then I'll take the whole thing back and move on, right? Then you have other issues of how do you make sure that not everybody wants to do this, right? So if you have your class project and you do this on a system, take over the machine. So how do you make sure you're fair, who has the privileges, and all those things are all issues for operating systems to deal with, right? But so this could be a powerful technique for programs of this sort. Right? So this is not in your book, but this is a very important thing that you want to worry about for multiprocessor, especially when you have lots of processes beyond 2, So is that way of stuff clear? So moving beyond what we talked about for general processes and stuff, right? You have the issue of real-time scheduling. I'm not going to go into any detail on real-time scheduling in this class, because there's a separate class on real-time systems in your senior year, right? Which goes into details of what happens here. So basically the notion is real-time tasks don't really care about how much CPU they have timing constraints, right? So for example, if it's controlling a nuclear power reactor, right, and when you switch the off button, it has to do something to turn the system off. It has to shut down the machine, right? So we talked about a whole bunch of parameters like wait time, response time, and all those things, but when the nuclear plant is about to blow, right, you don't really care about anything else. You don't care about any optimization parameter. You want that to maintain its deadline, right? So if you say if you press that button in 10 milliseconds, you will act on it, right? The OS has to drop everything that it's doing, right? It doesn't matter whether it's doing in-house cleaning or what have you. It has to finish what it's trying to do, right? So that's an example of a hard real-time system, right? And it doesn't have to be that stringent as a power plant. It could be, it's in your onboard car controlling your brakes, ABS or regular brakes and stuff. Most of your cars are controlled by many of these little devices. So you want to make sure that it happens. When you apply a brake, you don't want the process to say, I'm updating how fast you're going, and when the next schedule, when the next quanta comes, I'll apply the brakes, right? So there are different notions of this hardness, and there are some which are softer, right? Like for example, your TV is going through the same thing. Like your TV screen shows a picture every so often, right? Every 30 or 60 frames, depending on how you do this, right? So every so often, it has to show a picture so you can have a good screen, good viewing experience, right? But if it doesn't show one for whatever reason, usually it's bad. I mean, you probably have noticed sometimes, you see like blotchy stuff, and you see some where your picture is not as good as you would like. Usually lives are not lost by doing this. So you have different notions of what is absolutely hard, what is kind of hard, soft, and so on, right? So if any of you have used like TiVo kind of stuff, right? And if you've played with the freeware versions of it, right? What I'm talking about is if you have a TV program going in the back and you have your menus going in the front and you have like some applications running on the front, right? You want to make sure that some things are more real time than the other. You want the picture to show up more often than your menus. The menus can be a little slower. If you change your volume, it may take a little bit time, but you want the picture to appear in a certain fashion. So when you go into this model, right, the scheduling for that is a little different. Here you know precisely what you're doing because you're doing the same thing over and over again, right? So you go through a lot of effort to try to figure out how much time you would take for each task. So you have notions of deadlines, and then your scheduler has to say, if you have a deadline, it has to finish those, right, within the deadline. And you try to do other stuff. Most systems like Linux or Windows or what have you can schedule real-time systems, right? So you can specify that your process belongs to a class called real-time, and they'll try to do different scheduling, basically trying to make sure that you'll keep the deadline, right? How you do that, how you do the scheduling is beyond the scope of this class, right? If it has to be really, really hard, you do it a priori. You kind of figure out what the algorithm is so that nothing is left to for the OS to decide on the fly. So dispatcher basically knows precisely what it should do, right? If nuclear power plant is melting down, it's not calculating what it should do, right? For a TV kind of stuff, it could calculate, it could figure out the best thing it can do, because missing a deadline in a soft system is not catastrophic, right? So that's the focus of another class of scheduling. Most modern operating systems do that, because if you don't do this, if you're playing videos and stuff, you'll have horrible performance, right? So they have to deal with some level of real-timeness even in Windows XP or what have you. Not to the same extent as what you would see in a nuclear power reactor, right? So those are one of the other variations. The other variation is trying to figure out what would happen with threads, right? Remember we talked about threads. There's notion of a user level thread and the kernel level thread. So you have to figure out how this user level thread gets scheduled onto the kernel level threads, right? So that's usually in your library. It's in your pthreads library or something. So you have to figure out how it figures out which thread to run. It's not an operating system problem, but still somebody has to deal with them because the end applications will see the difference, right? And then you also have the notion of global scheduling, where the kernel has to decide which thread to run, right? And it's much clearer when you think about the kernel level threads of why you have affinity. If you have two threads from the same process, right, they're sharing all the data structures together. So if you schedule the two threads from the same process onto the same processor, you expect that somehow they can keep some of the context, right? You expect that since they share the same address space, since they share a whole bunch of stuff, if you schedule them together, or if you schedule them right after each other, right, you expect them to perform differently. So they tend to have more affinity, right? So the kernel threads scheduling is not just the notion of which thread should I run, but also trying to say, if I ran one thread from the same process just now, perhaps I should run another thread of the same process on the same processor, right? And that may give better performance. Right. So I think that's about it for scheduling, right? So those are the three topics we will have the exam on Friday. Basically, the notion of processes and threads, right? And how you would schedule them to use that one resource CPU, right? So this module is mostly about scheduling the CPU. Later on, we'll talk about scheduling the disks and memory systems and so on. The next module is about how to make the sharing possible. Right? One of the things that we kind of touched upon is when you have multiple threads operating on the same data, you have to protect the data or else bad things will happen, right? And how you would do that would be the focus of the next one, right? So are there any questions so far about how you would do CPU scheduling itself? We didn't go into detail of any one operating system and hope to do that on Monday, right? If there are no questions, then I think we can leave early. So did everyone get their homework assignment? If you haven't, come by, and otherwise I'll see you on Friday.
Corey?
Let me go back and
Okay, sure. Yeah, I think we, you know,
I saw the email.
okay.
You might have forgotten about it.
Well, because if you come up one side, you can go down the same side, or you go through the middle. So there's 1, 2, and then the other side, 3, 4.
Also the other can be the open upload. I don't know.